turn this back over to you, Mr. Holt.
We've heard some of the recommendations. I don't know if we have any questions with Dr. Conway or any of the staff regarding these recommendations, or if you have your own recommendations that you wish to put on the table. Mrs. Vernon.
Couple clarification for me. Is there a deadline, Dr. Conway, when these decisions must be made, regardless of the outcome of the referendum? When would be the absolute outside that we could make adjustments in the budget?
If it has to do with hiring, it would be sooner rather than later, certainly, or letting people go from positions. That's the other difficult thing. If they're non-tenured teachers and we let them go for budgetary reasons, then they're on a callback list in case we do have another position. But you know, the sooner the better. There's really no deadline date, if that's what you're
Okay, so there isn't, all right, can't establish a deadline for these decisions then.
We would like
I
to
understand, I
exactly,
understand that,
exactly.
but I'm wondering if it, okay.
It's staff members who are looking, that people may look at the list and say, all right, I'm an elementary teacher, I think I was the last one hired, and they may just start looking immediately, and maybe that's the person doesn't lose their job for some reason, and so then we're down a really good teacher. It's really the management of the staff at that point, and trying to keep people if we can.
What's our commitment as far as the Alliance grant? Can we make adjustments to teacher coaches, or is that cast in concrete until you how does that work?
There are budget changes. You have to justify why you've changed your plan, so for the current plan.
671.
Pardon? The 671, correct, the 671. And we're going to learn next Friday, actually, about the format for the evaluations. We haven't received that yet. And I'm hoping we're going to learn about next year as well. Of course, they don't know in solid numbers because the legislation hasn't finished and passed their budget yet. But in terms of this year, we'd be looking at, they'd want to see that what we did, were we faithful to what we said we were going to do? If not, why? What did you do instead? How did you want to do that? We just got an email yesterday, I think, to say that your window for making your budget changes is pretty much almost over.
So if we needed to make changes, I'll just pick on teacher coaches. If we needed to make a change like that based on budgetary constraints, lack of funding, whatever, that could happen. We're not.
You mean for for next year?
Right.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
Okay, so we can change that. Okay. Although I really appreciate everybody, the people who participated in developing this list, I certainly appreciate the time and the thought process. But honestly, I have been hoping for something different, a different approach, something that was a little more far-reaching, a little longer-lasting, maybe a better payback. And what we've always done, those words that some of us don't like, what we've always done to solve this issue in the past hasn't worked because it comes back year after year. And my guess is that it probably won't work again this year. So I don't think we should be reaching into technology to solve our problem because that just moves us backwards and not forward, and it hurts educational outcomes. I think if teachers are our greatest resource, then again, reducing them hurts us. It doesn't move us forward, it moves us backwards. I think that we should be considering a plan that maybe addresses our current problem and others at the same time going forward. Putting Vernon in a better position, not always scrambling for dollars here and dollars there, chipping away at programs that are necessary. We did it in years past, and look what, just as an example, our capital improvements budget, the board kept taking money out of that and out of that to meet other obligations, and pretty soon we had crumbling buildings and we had to go to bonding, and it didn't save anybody anything at all. It was all a short-term fix that came back to nip us on the to bite us. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I'm wondering if there isn't something that would put Vernon in a stronger position going forward, like addressing our magnet school increases, like addressing our special education increases. How about something that reduces those tuitions and increases our revenues and provides us money that we could put back into the system? And if you just, I'd ask you to indulge me and think about it for a minute, that's all. That moving students from one elementary school and distributing them to another elementary school, and then using that emptied elementary school to house special education students who are tuitioned to out-of-town programs, keeps the money in Vernon. And then if that program is expanded and offered to other towns who have the same unique special ed issues that we have, we could then receive tuition students. Wouldn't it be nice for Vernon to be a receiving town instead of a sending town? I think that thinking out of the box is really important, and I think that we need to be willing to take risks. And I don't mean risks in accounts, I mean risks in doing innovative kinds of things and not being the Vernon that we've been for years and years, which is plodding, just plodding. I'd like to suggest that the board direct the superintendent, actually, I'll move that the board direct the superintendent to prepare a feasibility report assessing closing an elementary school, redistributing population, and establishing a special education school in the very near future, and reporting that back to the board in 2 weeks. If I get a second, I'd like to address that, if that's all right, please.
Mr. Percy.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Michelle, you have the floor to address your...
Although I understand educational needs have changed, and theories have changed, and like I said the other night, I think while we're experimenting with what works, we're sacrificing kids, and I'm really tired of participating in that. Talcottville, when it was functioning, was a model that the state held up to other districts. And I think that's something that we really need to consider again. I know that Mrs. Buell and Dr. Conway have reached out to a couple places in town. But again, we're talking about someone else's facility. I think we should be thinking about using our own facilities and taking care of our own needs, not asking someone else to do it, and then becoming a receiving town and reducing tuitions and increasing revenues. More taxpayer dollars stay in Vernon for Vernon and for Vernon children's education, and I think it's win-win for everybody.
Other discussion on the motion? Mr. Percy.
It's a very interesting idea, Michelle. The thing I want to point out is that any tuition we take in, town council gets.
That would have to be part of our discussion. Oh,
Sorry. I just want to point out that we can't, and I know we all know this, but I want to say it publicly, that all the money that comes into our school system through BOE and everything else, the town of Vernon gets. I know, it's the way it's always been in Vernon. So that's something we need to address, I think, with the town council and the mayor. But it's an interesting idea.
Mr. Nicholson.
To Mr. Percy's point, the vast majority of the money that we get is from the town, from the taxpayers. So any money that comes in only makes sense to go back to the people that are funding us in the first place.
Other discussion? Just want to give everybody a chance to go around once before we go twice. Mr. Kemp.
I'd almost like to have that reread because it's such an encompassing motion. It has to do with assessing, closing, redistribution, receiving funds, and 2 weeks. I tried to write that down as fast as I could. I'm all for out of the box. I don't know how any staff is going to come back to us in 2 weeks with an answer to that kind of question. I'm a little stunned with this closing of the schools because I thought you explained that what you would do is reallocate the use of existing schools, not close ones. So please clarify what you meant there. The Facilities Committee has been trying to figure out what to do with its buildings for such a long time. We've had conversations about what do we do with the middle school? Should we move 5th grade into the middle school? Should we not? Some things that never got out there at all. Should we close the school? That was discussed some years ago, and the reaction in the community was horrendous about closing a school. This community has been arguing for its neighborhood schools for years and years, over and over again, like it or not. The fact is, we do have a middle school that is not used the way it used to be. I mean, our population in town in 1970 of students was 7,000 students, never mind 4,500. Now it's 3,500. So, of course, we were running double sessions at the high school. For those of you who remember doing that when you went here. But we couldn't come up with a viable answer as to whether or not we would move a 5th grade to make room for all-day kindergarten, to try to make room for other grades if we redistributed the grades or not. That didn't happen a year ago, so we didn't go to a reconfiguration of the grades. We saw the reaction the community got over that, or shared with us over that. I don't know how you would get an answer from any group in 2 weeks on any of this, but I don't know. I don't have a problem receiving funds, but that also presumes that other towns would send them to us in the first place. We are a receiving town. We're a receiving town in the VOAG. We receive a lot of money in VOAG funds. And we've never not received money because we have education funds in over the years. It's not a lot, but we would educate another child if people wanted to come here, send their child here. We have received some funds in that. It's not that we wouldn't do that. We've always been willing to, not to mention the VOAG. So, to think that we could suddenly become a receiving town in a more significant way, I think might be wishful thinking. The only idea that I have that can go along with this a little bit is, what if there was some kind of magnet school that we could create? We couldn't do it in 2 weeks. There are two parochial schools that have closed. They don't conform to AHERA codes, which means they're codes that you have to have in place to have kids in them. So there would have to be an investment. Because they're parochial schools, they didn't have to conform to AHERA codes. In some way, use those facilities or another building to create some kind of magnet. That would be enough children, if it worked out, to receive enough funds to make a difference. Rather, I mean, getting 5 or 10 more kids to come to us isn't going to do anything. It would have to be something very significant, like establish a magnet school. If the state would allow it anyway. There's all kinds of restrictions they have. But I don't know where we're going with this motion, but I don't think it's viable in time to solve our budget problem.